313 believers. Standing against an army of 1,000, they had few swords, few horses, and almost no armor.
Dust began to rise across the desert. Swords were drawn from their sheaths, and one of the greatest battles in history had begun.
But what happened next changed the course of history forever. Courage over fear, and Allah granted a victory.
When you sought help from your Lord, He answered you. Indeed, I will reinforce you with 1,000 angels, following one another in succession.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a confrontation that absolutely reshaped the Arabian Peninsula, the Battle of Badr. We're going to unpack exactly how a small, displaced community of refugees managed to stand up to a regional superpower. We'll look at the human drama, the socioeconomic drivers, and the exact sequence of events that led to a clash that still echoes through history today.
Now, to really grasp this, we have to look at the context. For 13 long years in Mecca, early Muslims endured severe persecution, torture, and unimaginable hardship. But they were strictly commanded to remain patient. They were not permitted to fight back because Islam has always held peace as a preferred path. The historical turning point came with this specific verse from the Quran, which finally granted permission for defensive fighting. It's crucial to note here, this wasn't a mandate for revenge. It was granted simply to defend innocent lives, protect property, and preserve their basic freedom to worship after a decade of oppression.
To understand why this battle inevitably occurred, we first need to look at the massive societal shift happening at the time. Let's look at a new Islamic society.
The year is 622 CE. After enduring those 13 years of hostility, the Prophet Muhammad and his followers migrated to Medina by the command of Allah. This wasn't just moving to a new town, it was a total reset. The Muslims arrived having left behind literally everything: their homes, their businesses, their lands, and their wealth. Many arrived in Medina with almost nothing except the clothes on their backs. Yet this migration set the stage for an entirely new chapter.
Upon arriving, the Prophet established a mosque. But here's the thing. It wasn't just a quiet sanctuary for worship. It became the functional, beating heart of a brand new society. We're talking a dynamic civic center where justice was administered, education took place, and crucial shura, or mutual consultation, happened. It was basically the headquarters of a fledgling community being built from the ground up.
Soon afterward, the Prophet established this profound bond of brotherhood between the Muhajirun, the immigrants from Mecca, and the Ansar, the helpers of Medina. The Ansar literally opened their doors, sharing their homes and possessions with the destitute newcomers. In 7th century Arabia, where your bloodline and tribe dictated your survival, this was revolutionary. For the very first time, faith became a stronger bond than tribal identity, wealth, or lineage. But, as you might expect, leaving Mecca didn't magically end the hostility. Let's explore the road to conflict. The leaders of Quraysh back in Mecca just couldn't accept that Islam was now growing into an organized community. They seized the lands and homes the Muslims had left behind and ruthlessly divided that confiscated wealth among themselves. Plus, the Quraysh were terrified this new community in Medina would threaten their economic power. You see, Mecca's economy depended heavily on lucrative trade caravans traveling to Syria, and those routes passed right by Medina. The Quraysh started strengthening alliances and ramping up military pressure. The tension was just incredibly high. This brings us to a massive trade caravan returning from Syria, carrying goods worth thousands of dinars, owned by the leading chiefs of Quraysh. It's led by the highly experienced merchant Abu Sufyan. The Prophet sets out with a small group of companions simply to intercept this caravan, mostly to recover wealth that had been unjustly taken from them in Mecca. They were not planning to fight a large army, but Abu Sufyan is sharp. He spots traces of Muslim scouts in the desert sand, immediately reroutes the caravan toward the Red Sea coast, and sends an urgent call to Mecca for backup. So a massive Meccan army mobilizes. But once the caravan actually escapes and is safe, logic says the army should just turn around and go home, right? Well, they didn't. Hubris took the steering wheel. Abu Jahl, one of the fiercest opponents of the Muslims, flat out refused to turn back. As this quote vividly shows, his goal wasn't about protecting wealth anymore. He wanted a public spectacle at the oasis of Badr to crush the Muslims and intimidate the rest of Arabia. He shifted the Quraysh's motivation entirely from economic defense to just pure, arrogant pride.
All right, let's head out to the desert of Badr itself and look at the night before battle.
Look at this side-by-side comparison, because it reveals just how wildly lopsided this matchup was.
The Muslim force was tiny, around 313 people. They had to take turns riding just 70 camels, had exactly 2 horses in the entire army, and carried very limited weapons. Facing them, 1,000 seasoned Quraysh warriors fully equipped with heavy armor, horses, and abundant supplies. By any conventional military metric, this was heading toward an absolute slaughter.
Now, rather than forcing his tiny, outgunned army into this terrifying situation, the Prophet consults his companions. Remember that principle of shura we talked about? Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, speaking for the Ansar, steps up and solidifies their unwavering support with this incredibly powerful declaration. They essentially promised they would follow him anywhere. Despite the terrifying odds, their morale was sky high.
The historical texts highlight a fascinating detail about the night before the clash. A rainstorm swept over the desert, providing massive physical and psychological reassurance to the Muslims. The terrain actually worked in their favor. The rain compacted the loose sand on the Muslim side, making it firm underfoot, while the ground beneath the heavy Makan camp turned into a muddy, exhausting slog.
So, the stage is set. Let's dive right into the morning of the 17th of Ramadan, the Battle of Badr.
Following Arab custom, the battle kicks off with 3-on-3 single combat. 3 heavily armored Meccan champions step out. In response, the Prophet sends forward Hamza, Ali, and Ubaidah. The texts describe these rapid, fierce duels where the Muslims decisively take down all 3 Meccan champions. This dramatic opening absolutely shocked the Quraysh and injected the outnumbered Muslim ranks with an incredible surge of confidence.
When the general melee began, the highly disciplined Muslim army held their ground. The Meccans found themselves totally unable to break the unified Muslim ranks, and panic quickly spread. Abu Jahl himself was mortally wounded on the battlefield. By the end of the day, the impossible had happened. The superpower of Arabia was routed, leaving 70 dead and 70 captured, alongside 14 noble Muslim martyrs.
The fighting may have ended, but what happened immediately after is perhaps the most surprising part of the whole record. Let's discuss mercy, justice, and lessons.
In the 7th century, prisoners of war were almost always treated with severe brutality. But instead of seeking revenge against the people who had tortured them for over a decade, the Prophet issued strict commands to treat the Quraysh prisoners with dignity. It was an astonishing inversion of wartime norms. The sources note that the Muslim companions actually gave their high-quality food, their bread, to the captives, choosing to just eat dates themselves. It was an extraordinary display of compassion.
There was also this immense ingenuity in how they handled ransoms. Usually, it's all about gold, right? But the Prophet implemented a system where if a prisoner lacked wealth but was literate, teaching exactly 10 Muslim children to read and write would completely fulfill their ransom and secure their freedom. It's a really striking policy that shows how deeply this new society prioritized education on par with financial wealth. Ultimately, the texts frame Badr as a massive masterclass in resilience. Yes, they planned meticulously and maintained discipline, but their success was fundamentally attributed to their profound faith and unity, completely breaking those old tribal hatreds. And perhaps most importantly, when they finally achieved unprecedented power, their first instinct wasn't vengeance, but mercy and justice.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. We so often equate power with sheer numbers, heavy weapons, or economic dominance. But Badr suggests true power lies in unity, conviction, and how you treat your enemies when the dust actually settles. So how does the story of Badr challenge our modern definitions of power, and how might its lessons of unity and mercy apply to the conflicts of today? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible piece of history, and I'll catch you next time.